My husband disappeared, and years later his younger sister pulled up in a luxury car and just said, "Get in." What she showed me that day shattered everything I thought I knew about the man I married. But by the end of that night, I walked away with something he never expected me to have. Let me tell you how a single car ride changed my life forever. Before we continue, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to hear my story. If you're comfortable, let me know where you're listening from, and what time it is where you are. Now let me tell you my story. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I need you to understand something before I tell you this story. 3 years ago, my husband vanished without a trace. Not kidnapped, not murdered, just gone. And for 3 years I lived in a hell that no one who hasn't experienced it can truly understand. It's not like death, where there's closure, where people bring casseroles and hug you and tell you it'll be okay. It's a suspended state of grief, where every day you wake up wondering if today is the day you'll get answers. David and I met when I was 27 and he was 29. I was a nursing student working nights at a diner to pay my tuition. He was an accountant at a mid-sized firm. Nothing fancy but stable, reliable. He came into the diner every Tuesday night, always ordered the same thing, coffee, black and a slice of apple pie. For 3 months he did this. For 3 months I refilled his coffee and smiled, and he smiled back. Then, one Tuesday he left a note on a napkin with his tip. It said, "I'm either very shy or very patient. Would you have dinner with me? Somewhere that's not here." I laughed out loud when I read it. We had our first date that weekend. He took me to a modest Italian restaurant, the kind with red checkered tablecloths and candles and wine bottles. We talked for 4 hours. He told me about his family, small, quiet, private. His parents had passed away when he was younger, and he only had one sibling, a younger sister named Maya who was in college. David was gentle, thoughtful. He remembered everything I told him. When I mentioned I loved sunflowers, he brought me one on our next date. When I said I was stressed about my pharmacology exam, he showed up at the diner with flashcards he'd made himself. He wasn't flashy, he didn't have a lot of money, but he was present. He was there. And in a world where so many men are half invested, half listening, always looking at their phones, David was a miracle. We dated for 2 years before he proposed. It was simple. No elaborate plan, no crowd of people filming it for social media. We were walking through the park on a Sunday morning, and he just stopped, turned to me and said, "Sarah, I don't want to walk through life with anyone else. Will you marry me?" The ring was modest, a small diamond on a silver band. I didn't care. I said yes before he even finished the question. We got married at City Hall. My parents were there, my 2 best friends, and Maya. Maya was 22 then, a college dropout who'd been bouncing between retail jobs. She seemed lost, quiet, always a little uncomfortable in her own skin. She wore a simple dress to our wedding, barely said 2 words, and left early. David told me not to take it personally. Maya had always been awkward around people, struggled with anxiety. I believed him. I had no reason not to. Our marriage was good. Not perfect, but real. We lived in a 1-bedroom apartment in a decent neighborhood. I worked as a registered nurse at the city hospital, and David continued his accounting job. We had enough to pay our bills, take a modest vacation once a year, save a little. We talked about buying a house, having kids someday. We were building a life brick by brick, the way normal people do. Then, 3 years ago on a random Tuesday in October, David didn't come home from work. At first I wasn't worried. Maybe he stopped at the store, maybe he went for a drink with a colleague. But by 8 p.m. when he still wasn't answering his phone, I started to panic. By 10 p.m. I called his office. They said he'd left at his normal time, 5:30. By midnight, I called the police. The officer who took my report was kind but realistic. "Ma'am, adults have the right to leave. Unless there's evidence of foul play, we can't do much for the first 48 hours. I wanted to scream. My husband was gone. How was that not evidence of something? They found his car 3 days later parked at a long-term lot near the airport. His wallet was inside. His phone was inside. But no David, no note, no explanation. The police investigated. They interviewed me, his co-workers, our neighbors. They checked our bank accounts. No unusual activity. They checked his credit cards. Nothing. It was like he'd evaporated. For 6 months I called the detective every week. "Any updates?" "No ma'am, I'm sorry." They eventually classified it as a voluntary disappearance. They told me some people just walk away from their lives. They told me to accept it and move on. But how do you move on when you don't have answers? How do you mourn someone who might still be alive? How do you stop waiting for the door to open, for the phone to ring, for some explanation that makes sense? I couldn't afford the apartment on my own, so I moved into a smaller place, a studio in a less safe neighborhood. I picked up extra shifts at the hospital. I took a weekend job at a retail store. I stopped seeing friends because I couldn't bear the pity in their eyes. I stopped going to family gatherings because everyone wanted to talk about David, to tell me I needed to let go and move forward. My mom would say, "Baby, you're only 32 years old. You can't put your life on hold forever." My best friend Keisha would say, "Sarah, honey, maybe he's not coming back. Maybe you need to accept that." And I would nod and smile and say, I know. But inside I was screaming, because they didn't understand. They didn't wake up every morning with that tiny torturous hope that maybe today would bring answers. I kept wearing my wedding ring. I kept David's clothes in the closet. I kept his toothbrush in the bathroom. People thought I was crazy. Maybe I was. But removing those things felt like admitting he was gone forever, and I wasn't ready to do that. 3 years. That's how long I lived in that limbo. 3 years of working myself to exhaustion so I wouldn't have time to think. 3 years of crying in my car during lunch breaks. 3 years of wondering what I did wrong, what I missed, what signs I ignored. And then on a cold Thursday evening in November, everything changed. I was finishing a double shift at the hospital. 16 hours on my feet, dealing with emergencies, comforting families, holding it together because that's what nurses do. I was exhausted, bone-deep tired. The kind of tired where you feel like you're moving through water. I walked out to the parking lot, pulling my coat tight against the wind, my eyes on my old Honda Civic parked under a flickering streetlight. That's when I heard it. The low rumble of an expensive engine. A black Mercedes G-Wagon pulled up beside me, aggressive and fast, stopping so close I had to step back. The windows were tinted, and for a second my nurse instincts kicked in. Danger, threat, run. But then the driver's window rolled down and I saw a face I hadn't seen in 3 years. Maya, but not the Maya I remembered. This Maya was transformed. Her hair was professionally styled, sleek and glossy. She wore designer sunglasses even though it was nearly dark. Diamond studs glinted in her ears. Her leather jacket probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Sarah," she said, her voice cool and steady, "get in." I stared at her, my brain struggling to process what I was seeing. "Maya, what are you doing here?" "Get in," she repeated, more firmly. "It's about David." My heart stopped. Actually stopped. For 3 years I'd been waiting for those words. It's about David, and now here they were, delivered by his sister in a car that cost more than I'd earned in 2 years. "Is he alive?" I whispered. Maya's jaw tightened. "Get in the car, Sarah. We need to talk, but not here." I should have been cautious. I should have asked more questions, but I was desperate. After 3 years of silence, of wondering, of not knowing, someone was finally offering answers. So I walked around to the passenger side and climbed into the Mercedes. The interior was immaculate. Cream leather seats, spotless dashboard, that new car smell mixed with expensive perfume. Maya didn't look at me as she pulled out of the parking lot. She drove in complete silence, her hands gripping the steering wheel, her expression unreadable behind those sunglasses. "Maya, please," I finally said, my voice shaking. "Is David alive? Where is he? What happened?" She didn't answer, just kept driving. "Maya," I said louder, "you can't just pick me up and say it's about David and then not tell me anything. I've been living in hell for 3 years. 3 years. You owe me." "I don't owe you anything," Maya cut me off, her voice sharp. Then she sighed, and her tone softened slightly. "I'm sorry, that came out wrong. I need you to see something before I explain. If I tell you now, you won't believe me. You'll think I'm lying or crazy. Try me," I said bitterly. "At this point I'll believe anything." She shook her head. "No. You need to see it with your own eyes." I looked at her more closely. The last time I'd seen Maya, she was a nervous, barely functioning college dropout working at a mall clothing store. She'd been thin, anxious, wearing clothes from clearance racks. Now she looked like she'd stepped out of a luxury magazine. Everything about her screamed money. Real money, not just a decent paycheck. "What happened to you?" I asked quietly. "You look completely different. Maya's lips pressed into a thin line. Everything changed, Sarah. For all of us. You just didn't know about it. What does that mean? She didn't answer. We were leaving the city now, heading toward the suburbs, then past the suburbs, into an area where houses sat on acres of land, where gates and long driveways hid mansions from the road. My stomach started to churn. Maya, where are we going? You'll see. 20 minutes later, she turned onto a private road. A massive iron gate stood closed, and Maya pressed a button on her visor. The gate swung open silently. We drove up a long tree-lined driveway, and then the house came into view. It wasn't a house, it was an estate. A massive modern mansion with floor-to-ceiling windows, multiple wings, and a circular driveway with a fountain in the center. There were other luxury cars parked outside, a Bentley, a Range Rover, a Porsche. I couldn't breathe. What is this? Maya finally took off her sunglasses and looked at me. Her eyes were hard, but there was something else there too. Sadness. Maybe guilt. This, she said slowly, is where your husband has been living for the past 3 years. The world tilted. I grabbed the dashboard to steady myself. What? This is my family's estate. Sarah? David's family. Our family. The family he told you was small and quiet and unremarkable. She laughed, but it was a bitter sound. He lied to you, we all did. Or rather, we all lived a lie. I couldn't speak, couldn't think. I just stared at the mansion, at the luxury cars, at the perfectly manicured lawn. Come on, Maya said, opening her door. You wanted answers. Let's get you some answers. I followed her like a zombie, my legs moving automatically while my brain tried to catch up. We walked up marble steps to a massive front door. Maya didn't knock. She just opened it and walked in. I followed. The interior was even more stunning than the exterior. The foyer had a double staircase, a chandelier that probably cost more than my car, and artwork on the walls that looked like it belonged in a museum. I could hear classical music playing softly from somewhere deeper in the house. Maya, I don't understand, I whispered. What is this? How? Let me start from the beginning, Maya said, leading me into what looked like a sitting room. It was decorated in shades of cream and gold, with furniture that probably required special insurance. She gestured for me to sit on a velvet sofa, and she sat across from me in a matching chair. She took a deep breath. Our father, Richard Chen, was a self-made multi-millionaire. Tech investments in the 90s, real estate development, venture capital. By the time David was born, our father was worth about $40 million. By the time I was born, it was closer to 80 million. I stared at her. This couldn't be real. But our father had a philosophy. Maya continued. He believed that inherited wealth destroyed people, made them soft, entitled, useless. He'd seen it happen to friends' kids, to cousins. So he decided his children would never know about the money until we proved ourselves worthy of it. Worthy? I repeated numbly. David and I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood, middle-class schools, middle-class everything. Our father had a secret. He lived a double life. To us, he was a humble businessman who worked hard. We had no idea about the mansions, the investments, the empire he was building. He kept it completely hidden. That's insane, I whispered. That's our father, Maya said flatly. When David turned 25, our father told him the truth, told him about the money, the businesses, everything. But there was a condition. If David wanted his inheritance, his share of the family wealth, he had to complete what our father called the transformation. The transformation, Maya nodded. 3 years of complete immersion in this world, living here, learning the businesses, cutting ties with his before life. Our father believed that you couldn't truly become wealthy if you were still emotionally attached to your middle-class existence. He called it killing your old self to birth your new self. My hands were shaking. You're telling me David knew about this before he disappeared? Yes. And he chose this. He chose to leave me, to let me think he was dead or kidnapped or... My voice broke. Maya's expression was pained. He chose the money, Sarah. When our father laid out the terms, David had 48 hours to decide. Walk away from everything, this inheritance, this life, or commit fully. No contact with his previous life for 3 years. Complete dedication to transformation. He chose this, I repeated, and suddenly I was crying. Not sad crying, but angry crying. He let me suffer. He let me worry. He let me think I was going crazy. For 3 years. I know, Maya said quietly. I watched it happen, and I hated it. Then why didn't you tell me? I demanded. Why didn't you reach out? Why didn't you? Because I was part of it too, Maya said, her voice rising. When I turned 22, I got the same offer, the same choice, and I took it, Sarah. I left my old life, my friends, everything. I convinced myself it was worth it, that 3 years of isolation was worth a lifetime of security. But you're here now, I said. You came to get me. Why? Maya stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the manicured grounds. Because I watched what this life did to David. I watched him transform, just like our father wanted. And not in a good way. He became cold, calculating, exactly like our father. All he cares about now is business, investments, expanding the portfolio. The David you married, he's gone. Sarah, this life killed him. Where is he? I asked, my voice trembling. I need to see him. Maya turned to face me. He's here. Upstairs in his office. But Sarah, you need to prepare yourself. He's not the man you remember. I don't care. I need to see him. Now. Maya studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Follow me. We walked through the mansion, down hallways lined with expensive art and photographs. I noticed the photos as we passed. The same family but in 2 different versions. Old photos showed a modest, happy family in regular clothes at regular places. New photos showed the same people in designer clothes at galas, on yachts, at exotic locations. It was like watching a transformation in real time. Maya stopped outside a door at the end of a hallway. She knocked once. Come in, said a voice that made my heart stop. David's voice. Maya opened the door and stepped inside. I followed, my legs shaking. The office was huge, with built-in bookshelves, a massive desk, and floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking the property, and there, sitting behind the desk in an expensive navy suit, was my husband. He looked up from his laptop, and when he saw me, he froze. Sarah? He breathed. I couldn't move. Couldn't speak. I just stared at him. He looked older but in a polished way. His hair was professionally cut. His skin looked like he'd been getting facials. He wore a watch that probably cost more than our old apartment. Everything about him was refined, expensive, transformed. What is she doing here? David asked Maya, his voice sharp. She deserves to know. Maya said. She deserves to see what you chose. David stood up and I saw his jaw clench. Maya, this wasn't your decision to make. This was... You left me. I finally screamed. The words exploded out of me. You left me. You let me think you were dead. Do you have any idea what these 3 years have been like? Do you have any idea? David's expression softened slightly. Sarah, I can explain. Explain? I laughed, hysterical. Explain what? That you chose money over me? That you abandoned your wife to live in a mansion? It wasn't like that, David said, walking around the desk toward me. I did this for us, for our future. I had to complete the transformation to access my inheritance. $50 million. Sarah, $50 million. I did it so we could have everything, so you'd never have to work double shifts again, so we could have the life we always dreamed about. The life we dreamed about, I repeated incredulously. We dreamed about a small house with a yard, maybe 2 kids. Family dinners. Growing old together. We didn't dream about mansions and abandonment. I was going to come back for you, David insisted. The 3 years are almost up. I was going to come get you, bring you here, show you everything. We were going to start fresh. On your terms, I said bitterly. You were going to swoop back into my life like some kind of savior with your money and your new life. And I was supposed to just... What? Forget? Forgive? Be grateful? Yes, David said, and he sounded genuinely confused about why I wasn't understanding. Yes, that's exactly it. I suffered too, Sarah. Being away from you was the hardest thing I've ever done. But I kept telling myself it was temporary, that it would be worth it, that we'd have everything we ever wanted. I looked at him, really looked at him, and I realized Maya was right. This wasn't the man I married. The man I married would have talked to me, would have included me in the decision, would have found another way. This man standing in his expensive suit in his expensive office, talking about $50 million like it justified everything. This was a stranger. You didn't suffer like I did, I said quietly. You knew where I was. You knew I was okay. I had nothing, no information, no closure, no choice. You took everything from me, my peace, my sanity, my ability to move forward. You took it all because you wanted to be rich. It's not just about being rich, David argued. It's about security. It's about never having to worry again. It's about giving our future children everything. Our future children, I interrupted. David, you've been gone for 3 years. I'm 35 years old. I spent what should have been prime years of my life crying myself to sleep, wondering if you were dead, and you think we're just going to pick up where we left off and start a family? He faltered. I thought, you didn't think about me at all, I said. You thought about yourself, about what you wanted, about what would make you feel successful and secure. I was just a piece you planned to pick up later after you'd won your prize. That's not fair, David said, his voice hardening. I made a sacrifice. No, I cut him off. You made a choice, and it wasn't me. The room fell silent. Maya stood by the door watching us. David stared at me and I could see him struggling, trying to find the words that would make me understand, that would make this okay. But there were no words. Because this would never be okay. Sarah, he finally said, his voice softer. I love you. I never stopped loving you. Everything I did with you in mind. I wanted to give you the world. I didn't want the world, I whispered. I just wanted you, the real you. Not this polished wealthy version, just you. I'm still me, he insisted. I shook my head. No, you're not. The man I married would never have done this. He would have talked to me. We would have made the decision together. We were partners. David. At least, I thought we were. Maya spoke up from the doorway. David, show her the contract. David's head snapped toward his sister. Maya, don't. Show her, Maya said firmly. She needs to see all of it. What contract? I asked. David closed his eyes briefly, then walked to a filing cabinet. He pulled out a document and handed it to me. I started reading. It was a legal contract, dated 3 years and 2 months ago. It outlined the terms of David's inheritance, 3 years of residence at the family estate, no contact with previous life, full immersion in family business training, and at the bottom a clause that made my blood run cold. Upon completion of the 3-year term, participant may choose to reunite with previous spouse. However, should spouse be deemed incompatible with family standards or unwilling to assimilate into family culture, participant must choose between inheritance and marriage. I read it 3 times, making sure I understood. So even if you came back for me, I said slowly, if your family decided I wasn't good enough, you'd have to choose between me and the money. David didn't answer. And we both know what you'd choose, I said, tears streaming down my face now. Don't we, David? Because you already made that choice once. It wouldn't come to that, David said desperately. You're intelligent, adaptable. My family would love you. We could make this work, Sarah. We could have everything. I don't want everything, I said, my voice breaking. I just wanted my husband, the man who brought me sunflowers, the man who made me flashcards, the man who proposed to me in the park without a crowd or a photographer. That man is dead, isn't he? David's face crumpled. For a moment I saw a flash of the old David, the one I loved. But then his expression hardened again, that wealthy person mask sliding back into place. I'm right here, Sarah. I'm standing right in front of you. No, I said. You're not. I turned to Maya. Why did you bring me here? Really? It wasn't just to give me closure. What's your angle? Maya met my eyes. You're smarter than David gives you credit for. Come with me. There's something else you need to see. She led me out of the office, leaving David standing there. We went downstairs to another room, a library with leather chairs and more expensive books than I'd seen outside of an actual library. Maya pulled out another document. This is our father's will. He died 6 months ago, right after David completed his 3-year term. I'm sorry, I said automatically, though I wasn't sure I meant it. Don't be. He was a brilliant businessman and a terrible father. She pointed to a section of the will. This is what I wanted you to see. Our father included a provision for spouses who were abandoned during the transformation period. I read the section, my eyes widening. This says I'm entitled to compensation for emotional damages incurred during participants' isolation period. $5 million, Maya said. That's what you're owed, Sarah. Tax-free, separate from David's inheritance. It's yours regardless of whether you stay married to him or not. I sat down heavily. $5 million. Our father might have been cold, but he wasn't stupid. He knew his transformation process would destroy marriages. This was his way of... I don't know, buying off the collateral damage? Easing his conscience? Maya shrugged. I've already started the paperwork. If you want it, it's yours. All you have to do is sign. Why are you doing this? I asked. Why are you helping me? Maya sat down across from me. Because I'm the one who got away with her soul intact. When I went through the transformation, I was younger, more resistant. I took the money, but I didn't let it change who I fundamentally was. I used my wealth to help people. I'd fund scholarships, support small businesses in underserved communities, volunteer at shelters. I found a way to have the money without becoming the money. She leaned forward. But David let it consume him. He became exactly what our father wanted, a ruthless businessman who prioritizes profit over people, and I watched him do it. I watched him convince himself that abandoning you was noble, that it was some kind of sacrifice. It made me sick. So you brought me here to, what? Wake him up? Show him what he's become? Partly, Maya admitted, but mostly I brought you here because you deserve the truth. You deserve compensation for what you've been through, and you deserve the chance to make your own choice. With full information, stay with David and live this wealthy life, or take your settlement and build your own life. Your choice, not his. I looked down at the document in my hands. $5 million. It was more money than I'd ever imagined having. It was freedom. It was security. It was justice in a weird, legal way. What happens if I take it? I asked. You sign the papers, the money is transferred to an account in your name within 30 days. You file for divorce if you want, or you stay married if you want. Either way, the money is yours. Maya paused. David will be furious. He didn't want you to know about this clause. He wanted to control how and when you came back into his life. Of course he did, I said bitterly. We sat in silence for a moment. Then Maya said, Can I tell you something? Sure. When David first disappeared, I wanted to tell you. I fought with him about it. I said you deserved to know that leaving you in the dark was cruel. But he convinced me it was necessary. He said if you knew the truth, you'd try to stop him. You'd make him choose between the money and you. And he needed the money, for both of you. That's a lie, he told himself. I said. He needed the money for himself. Maya nodded. I know that now. It took me a while, but I see it clearly. This wealth, it reveals who people really are. Some people get money and become more generous, more compassionate. They see it as a tool to do good. But some people get money and become convinced they're superior, that they're smarter and more deserving than everyone else. David became the second type. I thought about that, about the David I'd married, the one who was kind and humble and thoughtful. Had that been an act? Or had the real David been killed by this transformation? I need to talk to him again, I said. Are you sure? I need closure. Real closure? Maya nodded. I'll take you back up. We returned to David's office. He was standing by the window, staring out at the grounds. He turned when we entered. Sarah, he said, please, let's talk about this rationally. I know you're upset, but I'm taking the settlement. I interrupted. His face went pale. What? The $5 million, your father's provision for abandoned spouses. I'm taking it. No, David said immediately. No, that's not. Sarah, that money is free if we divorce. We're not getting divorced. We're going to work this out. Are we? I asked calmly. David, tell me honestly. If I said I wanted nothing to do with this life, if I said I wanted you to walk away from all of this and come back to our modest apartment and our normal life, would you do it? He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Sarah, that's not fair. You can't ask me to give up $50 million. That's what I thought, I said. You wouldn't choose me over the money. Even now, knowing how much I've suffered, you wouldn't choose me. It's not about choosing, David insisted. We can have both. You and the money. We can build a beautiful life together here with everything we could ever want. On your terms, I said. In your world, becoming who you want me to be. That's not a partnership, David. That's assimilation. You're being dramatic, he said, his tone sharpening. You're letting emotion cloud your judgment. Think about what you're giving up. We could travel the world. We could have the best of everything. Our children would go to the best schools. I don't want children with you anymore, I said, and saying it out loud made it real. I don't want to raise kids with a man who thinks money is more important than honesty. With a man who abandoned his wife for 3 years and calls it a sacrifice. David's face flushed with anger. I did what I had to do. My father gave me an impossible choice. No, I corrected him. He gave you a choice and you made it. And now I'm making mine. If you take that money and leave, I won't take you back. David said coldly. You'll be walking away from all of this. From me forever. I know, I said. And I'm okay with that. For a moment, we just stared at each other. I saw the moment he realized he'd lost, the moment he understood that his money and his mansion and his transformed life weren't enough to make me stay. You're making a mistake, he said quietly. No, I replied, uncorrecting one. I turned to Maya. Do you have the papers here? She nodded and pulled out a folder from her bag. Right here, sign where I've marked and it's done. I took the pen she offered me. My hand was surprisingly steady. I signed my name on 4 different pages, each signature representing a choice to leave, to claim what I was owed, to close this chapter, to open a new one. When I finished, I handed the folder back to Maya. She smiled at me, and it was a real smile, warm and supportive. You're going to be okay, she said. Better than okay. I know, I said. And I meant it. I looked at David one last time. I hope you find happiness, David. I really do, but I don't think you will. Not with the way you're living. Because all the money in the world can't fill the emptiness of living without integrity. Don't lecture me about integrity, David snapped. You're taking $5 million. That I'm owed. I cut him off. For 3 years of hell that you put me through. That's not a windfall, David. That's compensation. There's a difference. I walked toward the door, then paused. Do you know what the saddest part is? If you'd just talked to me 3 years ago, if you'd told me about all of this and asked me to wait for you, I would have understood. I would have supported you. We could have made it work, but you didn't trust me enough to include me in the decision. You just disappeared, and that's what killed us. Not the money, not the mansion, your choice to cut me out. David didn't respond. He just stood there, looking lost in his expensive suit in his expensive office. Maya and I left the estate together. As we drove away, I looked back at the mansion one time. It looked cold and empty, despite all its grandeur. Where do you want me to take you? Maya asked. Home? I said. My little studio apartment. My actual home. She nodded and drove in silence for a while. Then she said, Can I give you some advice, from someone who's navigated this world? Please. Don't let the money change who you are. It's so easy to let it happen. You start buying expensive things, hanging out with wealthy people, and suddenly your values shift. You start measuring everything in dollars. Don't do that. Stay yourself. Use the money as a tool, not an identity. I will, I promised. I've actually been thinking about it already. I want to start a foundation for people whose spouses have disappeared. Resources, support groups, advocacy for better missing persons policies. Something real. Something that helps people. Maya's face lit up. That's beautiful, Sarah. And I'd like to help if you'll let me. My foundation could provide seed funding. I'd like that, I said, and I meant it. Maya had become more than just my ex-sister-in-law. She'd become an ally, maybe even a friend. She dropped me off in front of my building. It looked shabby compared to where I'd just been, but it was mine, honest and real and mine. The money will be in your account within 30 days, Maya said. I'll handle all the legal paperwork. You just focus on taking care of yourself. Thank you, I said, for everything, for telling me the truth, for giving me a choice. You deserved both, Maya said simply. I got out of the car and watched her drive away in her luxury SUV. Then I climbed the 3 flights of stairs to my studio apartment. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. It was small. The furniture was old. The appliances were outdated, but it was real, and it was mine. And for the first time in 3 years I felt at peace. That night, I lay in bed thinking about everything that had happened, about David and his choice, about Maya and her kindness, about the money that would change my life, about the foundation I would build, about the future that was suddenly full of possibility. I thought about the David I'd married, the one who brought me sunflowers and made flashcards and proposed in the park, and I mourned him. Because he really was gone. The man I saw today wasn't him. Maybe he never had been, or maybe the transformation really did kill that version of him. Either way, I needed to accept it, and let go. I also thought about who I wanted to be with $5 million. I made a promise to myself. I would never forget where I came from. I would never look down on people who had less. I would never measure someone's worth by their bank account. I would be everything David wasn't. 32 days later, I woke up to an email notification. The money had been transferred. I opened my banking app and stared at the number. $5,000. It felt surreal. Like it couldn't be real. But it was real. And it was mine. The first thing I did was quit my retail job. The second thing I did was reduce my hours at the hospital to part-time. I loved nursing, but I didn't need to work myself to exhaustion anymore. The third thing I did was hire a financial advisor, a recommended professional who specialized in helping people manage sudden wealth. Most lottery winners and inheritance recipients blow through their money in 5 years. She told me in our first meeting, "But you're smart. You're starting from a place of wanting to do good. We can make this money work for you and for others." We set up a foundation called The Waiting Room, a resource for people whose loved ones had disappeared. We funded support groups, hired advocates to push for better missing persons policies, and created a 24-hour hotline for people who needed someone to talk to. We partnered with private investigators to offer pro bono services to families who couldn't afford them. Within 6 months, we'd helped 12 families get answers. Some were happy endings, some weren't, but every single family was grateful to have closure, to have support, to know they weren't alone. I also bought a modest house, nothing like David's mansion, a 3-bedroom in a good neighborhood with a small yard and a front porch. I decorated it with things I actually liked, not things that looked expensive. I planted sunflowers in the garden. I dated a little, but I wasn't in a hurry. I was rediscovering who I was without the weight of worry and grief. I was learning to be Sarah again, not just the woman whose husband disappeared. Maya and I stayed in touch. She became one of my closest friends. She funded our foundation's expansion and connected me with other philanthropists who wanted to support our work. She showed me that wealth didn't have to corrupt, that it could be a force for good if you stayed grounded. One day, about a year after that car ride, Maya called me. "I thought you should know David got married." My heart did a small flip, but not from pain, from surprise. That was fast. To a woman from another wealthy family. It was very strategic. Her family has connections he wants. His family has money she wants. It's practically a business arrangement. Does he seem happy? Maya was quiet for a moment. No. He seems successful, but not happy. There's a difference. There is. I agreed. Do you ever regret it? Maya asked. Walking away? I thought about it, really thought about it. No. I said finally. I regret that I lost the David I married. I regret that I wasted 3 years of my life waiting and wondering. But I don't regret leaving. That wasn't my husband in that mansion. That was a stranger who happened to have his face. He asks about you sometimes, Maya said. Wants to know how you're doing. What do you tell him? The truth. That you're thriving. That you turned your pain into purpose. That you're probably happier now than you would have been with him and all his money. Good. I said. Let him sit with that. 2 years after that car ride, I stood on stage at a fundraising gala for The Waiting Room. I was wearing a simple black dress, expensive but not flashy. I'd learned to accept my wealth without letting it define me. I looked out at the crowd of donors and supporters. Maya was in the front row, smiling proudly. Next to her was James, a man I'd been dating for 6 months. He was a teacher, humble and kind, who loved me for who I was, not what I had. We were taking things slow, but it felt right, real. I spoke about my story not with bitterness but with honesty. About the 3 years of not knowing, about the night Maya pulled up in her Mercedes and said, "Get in." About finding out the truth and making the hardest choice of my life. About turning pain into purpose. Someone once told me that wealth reveals who people really are. I said. And they were right. Some people get money and become convinced they're superior. They use it to control, to manipulate, to buy their way out of accountability. But some people get money and become more compassionate. They use it as a tool to help others, to create change, to make the world a little bit better. I paused. I got my wealth in an unusual way, as compensation for someone else's choice to abandon me, and I could have let that money make me bitter. I could have used it to isolate myself, to build walls, to prove something to the person who hurt me. But instead I chose to use it to help others who are suffering the way I suffered. To turn my pain into their hope. The crowd applauded. I saw tears in some eyes. I saw Maya nodding, proud. After the speech, as people mingled and wrote checks to support our foundation, Maya came up to me. "You did good, Sarah. Really good." "We did good?" I corrected her. I couldn't have done any of this without you. She hugged me. You know, when I picked you up that night, I wasn't sure what would happen. I thought maybe you'd take David back. Maybe you'd be willing to overlook everything for the lifestyle. But you didn't. You stood your ground. You chose yourself. Best decision I ever made, I said. Later that night, I drove home to my modest house with the sunflowers in the garden. James followed me in his car. We were going to watch a movie and eat takeout and just be together, simple and real. As I pulled into my driveway, I thought about David in his mansion with his strategic wife and his business empire, and his $50 million. And I didn't feel jealous. I didn't feel like I'd missed out. I felt grateful. Because I'd learned something important. There are different kinds of wealth. There's the wealth that comes from money, the houses and cars and jewelry, and status. But there's also the wealth that comes from integrity, from knowing who you are and staying true to it even when it's hard. The wealth that comes from building something meaningful, from helping others, from loving and being loved for who you truly are. David had chosen the first kind of wealth. I'd chosen the second. And I was rich beyond measure. As I unlocked my front door, I thought about that night 3 years ago when Maya pulled up in her Mercedes and said, "Get in." That car ride had changed everything. It had given me the truth I'd been desperate for. It had given me the closure I needed. It had given me a choice I didn't know I had. But most importantly, it had given me back to myself. I stepped inside my house, kicked off my shoes and smiled. Because I was home. Really home. Not in a mansion built on abandonment and lies, but in a place I'd chosen, filled with things I loved, shared with people who loved me for who I was. Maya hadn't just given me a car ride that night. She'd given me freedom. And I'd taken it and built something beautiful. David thought he'd won by completing his transformation, by claiming his $50 million, by becoming the ruthless businessman his father wanted him to be. But I was the one who actually won. Because I'd transformed too. Not into someone richer or more powerful, but into someone truer, more whole, more myself. And that was worth more than any inheritance. Thank you for watching.